Phrasal verbs.
Learning about phrasal verbs is an important part of communicating in English. Phrasal verbs are common in all kinds of spoken and written English. They help to make our speech sound more natural. A phrasal verb is formed when a verb joins up with a particle to make a new meaning. For example, the word count means to say how many there are of something, as in 1, 2, 3, 4. The word on is a preposition that describes when an object is touching the top surface of something else. But when count and on join up, they make a whole new meaning, to trust or to rely on something or someone. For instance, I count on my father for advice when I have a problem. Phrasal verbs can be challenging because the grammar is complex. In order to correctly use a phrasal verb, it is helpful to know if it is transitive or intransitive and separable or inseparable. So, what's the difference between a transitive and an intransitive phrasal verb? A transitive phrasal verb requires an object. For instance, the phrasal verb work out means to solve, but there has to be something to solve, a problem, a math equation, or a disagreement. Work out needs an object. On the other hand, just like some verbs, some phrasal verbs are intransitive. They never have an object. For example, the phrasal verb come back means to return. We can come back to a place, but we cannot come back a place. Come back never has an object. If the verb is transitive, then speakers need to know where to put the object. Most phrasal verbs are separable. This means that the verb and the particle can be separated by the object. In other words, the object can go either between the verb and the particle or after the particle. For example, the phrasal verb look up means to search for something in the dictionary or online. We can look a word up and look up a word. The meaning doesn't change. Remember, if your object is a pronoun, however, it must go between the verb and the particle, so we can look it up, but never look up it. Some transitive phrasal verbs are inseparable. This means that the verb and the particle cannot be separated. The object never comes between them. One example of this kind of phrasal verb is care for. It means to take care of someone or something. We can say, the nurse cared for the sick patient. Even when we use pronouns, they need to go after the particle, as in, the nurse cared for her. We never say this or that. Phrasal verbs are challenging, but they are a really important part of English communication. So, what can students do to learn them? First, it can be helpful to learn a phrasal verb like you would learn a new vocabulary word. In other words, treat it like a unit, not like two separate words. Use your dictionary to look up the definitions of new phrasal verbs. You can find them under the verb. For example, the definition of go away is under the verb go in the dictionary. If you see or hear a phrasal verb, think about how it was used. Was there an object? Where was the object? As you start to think about the answers to these questions, you can start to collect information about the phrasal verbs you know, and you can start to apply that knowledge when you use the phrasal verbs in conversation yourself. You don't need to learn all 5,000 phrasal verbs at once. Instead, focus on learning the meaning of 2 or 3 each week. Experiment with them in your English conversation and writing until you feel comfortable using them, and then learn a few more. Don't give up.